It is important to remember these few facts to see the larger picture here. Presently, the Syrian regime, is engaged in a brutal game of survival, hoping to retain its power by using more violence and killing more people. This move against the tide of history, however, will not work. Trying to provoke Turkey into a war will not be of any use either. By attacking its own people, the Syrian regime has shown it has no respect for basic human rights. By attacking an unarmed, solo-flying Turkish jet, it has proven that it has no respect for international law either. The shooting down of an F-4 Turkish reconnaissance jet by the Syrian forces on June the 22nd confirms a fact many already knew for some time. The Syrian regime has become a liability and danger for not only Syrian people fighting for their freedom and dignity, but also for Syria's neighbors, including Turkey. As the regime in Damascus loses its legitimacy and control over the country, it is becoming more aggressive and hostile. Let me state that the F-4 Turkish jet was shot down in international airspace 13 nautical miles off the coast of Syria, and this is evidenced by Turkish, NATO, and other countries' radar records. The jet was flying solo, unarmed, and with clear identification. Its momentary entrance into the Syrian airspace constitutes no justification for its shooting down without any warning. By hitting the jet in international airspace, the Syrian regime has violated international law and shown its hostile intentions. This is an outcome of the regime's growing sense of insecurity. The Syrian regime has been fighting against its own people for more than a year. It is a brutal and dirty war and a result of the Ba'ath regime's refusal to recognize people as the only ground and source of political legitimacy. Despite the regime's widespread propaganda, the Syrian uprising began peacefully and remained so for months until the regime began to kill people en masse. Turkey, of course, will respond to the shooting of the Turkish jet in keeping with international law. Turkey has already revised and expanded engagement rules of the Turkish armed forces and will apply it to the new situation on the ground. As Prime Minister Erdoğan stated 2 days ago, on June the 26th, 2 days ago, any military element approaching Turkish borders from the Syrian side will be considered a military threat and treated accordingly. Turkey's common sense approach in this matter should not be taken as a sign of weakness by anyone. Turkey has no intention of escalating tensions with Syria or any other country in the region, but it will not let its resolve be tested. Let me also state that Turkey has no interest in other countries' internal affairs and respects all countries' political sovereignty. But this does not give any excuse to the Syrian regime to fight a brutal and dirty war against its own people. This hostile attack will not break Turkey's resolve to support the Syrian people's struggle for freedom and democracy. It will not deter the Syrian people from fighting for their lives, and it will not diminish the support of the world community for the Syrian people. In conclusion, let me state my optimism for the future of the Middle East. A lot has already been achieved over a short period of time. Yes, there are many challenges, no doubt, but they can be overcome through rational policies, good governance, national dialogue, transparency, and accountability. The Middle Eastern societies possess the human capital and the natural resources to make their region an oasis of justice, freedom, democracy, prosperity, culture, civilization, pluralism, and coexistence. Turkey will remain committed to supporting people's aspirations for a free and dignified life. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Ibrahim Bey. Now the floor is open for questions.
Good evening, I should say. Aaron Sebag, recent master's graduate from American University. Ibrahim, when you consider the consolidation of civilian control over the Turkish military, which we've seen over the last year and more, does that put Turkey in a new position where it might feel more comfortable to exercise its strategy in the region as a hard power in a way that perhaps it was reticent to doing before because of the role of the military over Turkish politics?
Ibrahim Bey, could you hear the question?
Yes, I heard it. Thank you. Well, it's a very good question. In any democracy in the world, of course, the armed forces must be under civilian control, and Turkey has achieved this after some, difficulties in our history of democracy. It's no secret that we have had 3 major military coups, in the last 50, 60 years. But now those relations have been, I think, more or less normalized, and there is general acceptance of this in the Turkish society also. Of course, we value Turkish army as part of our country's overall, power. As I mentioned, not only Turkey's soft power elements such as its culture, geography, economy, but also the hard power, the military power, is an integral part of Turkey's standing in the world. And of course, in the last decade or so, a much more healthier type of relationship has developed between the military and the civilian governments in Turkey in regards to foreign policy. From Cyprus issue to northern Iraq, from PKK to the Arab revolutions, from tensions with Greece to relations with Russia and many other countries in our region. And many of these actors that I just mentioned used to be considered a threat to Turkey's national security. And what happened over the last decade, Turkey's national security concept has evolved considerably, and I think has become much more democratic in the sense that the civilian input now is more significant, in constructing Turkey's national threat perception, and we no longer see, countries and other actors in our region as threats. We see everybody as partners. Of course, there are occasional problems, such as the one that we are facing today in Syria. In regards to the Syrian crisis. But those are policy-related issues, not structural issues. As far as the structure of civilian-military relations is concerned, I think we have come a long way, and this helps, of course, now the execution, the formulation and execution of Turkey's foreign policy.
Yes, please.
Just wanted to point out a technical possibility that
Could you please introduce yourself?
My name is Peter Humphrey. I'm an intelligence analyst. Wanted to point out a technical possibility that may turn down the temperature a bit on this international tragedy. If, in fact, the reconnaissance bird was close to the 12-mile limit and detected that it was locked on, he wants to get out of Dodge, as they say, and quickly swerve to get back into international waters. But the missile, often a heat-seeking missile, as most of them are, doesn't know that. So it just zones in onto its infrared source and goes sucking right into the engine of the airplane, not realizing that it too has crossed the international boundary. Well,
thanks for raising this issue. I think this is an important point to clarify. We've been working on this, ever since the incident happened Friday. In fact, we were flying in with the Prime Minister from Brazil just 1 hour before we landed. We got news. What happened, all the technical details that we have had now, I think it's the 5th or 6th day now, is that our plane went into Syrian airspace, and it was quickly warned that it was in the Syrian airspace, and then left the Syrian airspace upon the warning of the headquarters. And the plane was hit 15 minutes after it violated the Syrian airspace. So those 15 minutes is a long, long time for a jet fighter to leave Syrian airspace, to go back to the Turkish airspace, and then to go into the international airspace. And that's exactly what happened. So, the fact is that it was hit in 13 nautical miles off the coast of Syria. That's 1 mile of the Syrian airspace. And the 15-minute time lag there, I think explains, or at least needs explanation as to why they hit the plane 15 minutes after it violated or entered the Syrian airspace. Our conclusion is that they knew that the plane was leaving, that it was also a Turkish plane, even though the Syrians claimed that they didn't know it was a Turkish plane. But in fact, it had what they call IFF, that is identification friend or foe. That is, it was clear that it was a Turkish jet going there. But 15 minutes after entering the Syrian airspace, raises a lot of questions there.
Yes.
My name is Hadi Nikunuja. 2 questions. None of my question maybe sounds like I'm defending any particular side. I'm kind of pointing core issue. First question is, how do you, the Turkish government or Turkish policy explain the zero, I believe they call it zero tension policy between the neighbor country? And a second question is, without this big headline going back and forth, what's going on in the Middle East or what's going on in Syria, the kind of commonly, basically the issue is right now with Syria is because they're trying to break an ally between Iran, Syria, and Lebanon. And God forbid, and also we know with all this financial crisis going on since 2008, the condition of the world economic-wise, if people have an understanding of the history of the economy and before World War I and World War II, almost the condition is almost the same. And as we know, in World War I, they used the assassination of the Crown Prince of Hungary, I think Austria Empire, or in World War II, the Czechoslovakia issue, Poland issue, because World War I and World War II. And the question is this, when whatever reason, whatever side, is when, as the ambassador I think said, even Senator McCain said, and based on the way he looked at Iranian interaction is, Iran and Syria has a 33 years of a strategic and military alliance. So when whatever reason you want to kind of involve the military directly or indirectly, and pushing Iran may be involved, they keep talking about Russia, actually more is Iran. Are we not facing World War III? I mean, this is a, think about it.